Silent Hills, Star Wars 1313, Gotham by Gaslight. Here are 7 cancelled games that could have been amazing. We live in a constant world of new game announcements, with titles that go straight onto our mental wish lists as well as our Steam ones. But sometimes it doesn't always work out quite the way we want.
New game reveals at conferences are always exciting. The thrill of new characters, fresh potential, sequels after decades. But then after those big dramatic announcements and headlines, sometimes things just don't go according to plan. Studios merge, developers cite creative differences, and sometimes, just sometimes, Guillermo del Toro and Hideo Kojima break our hearts into a million tiny pieces.
Yes, for a multitude of reasons, some games just don't get to see what it looks like inside our hard drives. Here are 7 cancelled games that could have been amazing.
Of course, I'm going to start with Silent Hills. I know it's hard to talk about, but we'll get through it together. If you missed the tragedy in action, back at Gamescom in 2014 was the reveal of a new, mysterious horror game called PT. Not only did it look terrifying, but it was also available on PlayStation 4 immediately after the reveal.
As we now know, PT was far more than just your average 7 out of 10 horror. This repeating corridor of scares, dread and rolling eyeballs actually had a series of complicated puzzles to solve. However, instead of taking the internet a week to solve, it actually took a streamer a matter of hours.
As you finally escape the looping corridor after much looking in mirrors and trying not to get too scared of a doorknob, an end cutscene revealed that this was actually the playable teaser for a long-awaited Silent Hill sequel and starring none other than Norman Reedus. Not only that, but Silent Hills was being co-developed by the legendary Metal Gear creator Hideo Kojima and horror and fantasy director Guillermo del Toro. There was even this terrifying concept video that made us even more afraid of children's toys than ever before.
But yes, you clicked on this list for a reason, and you know what happened next. In 2015, relations broke down between Hideo Kojima and Konami, and Kojima left the studio after the completion of Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain.
Then, just to make sure that we didn't have it all wrong, Guillermo del Toro revealed at an event that the game had been cancelled. And that was that. No more Silent Hills. Ready for more heartbreak? Good. Then let's travel to a galaxy far, far away. While there's been more than enough Star Wars movies over the last few years and a stack of brilliant games to boot, nothing has scratched that modern day adventure itch. Until Star Wars 1313, that is. Or, was. Focusing on Boba Fett, this third-person actioner was set on Coruscant as he explored level 1313, a living city buried deep below the ground.
But yes, here we are again. Despite ticking all the excitement boxes for a new Star Wars game with more lore for an existing hero, a focus on guns and gadgets, and a thrilling Star Wars narrative with a conspiracy to uncover, things came to a screeching halt in 2013.
Disney had bought Lucasfilm for the rather hefty price tag of $4 billion the year before, and suddenly, despite the potential of this Unreal-powered adventure, the plug was pulled when LucasArts was shut down entirely. It was especially upsetting given the fact that Fett's adventures were going to be developed for the next generation of consoles, the as yet very unreleased PS4 and Xbox One.
Just to rub some great salt in the wound, yes, that is a Last Jedi reference, a second Star Wars action-adventure game has been cancelled since.
EA's Visceral Games project was being developed as a linear experience to compete with the likes of Uncharted and Tomb Raider, but since the closure of the studio, it's been announced that in response to player feedback, the experience is changing again. Maybe we'll still get a happily ever after with this one. Maybe. If all you've ever wanted after watching Game of Thrones is your own dragon, but you can't afford the insurance, Scalebound sounds like the perfect game. From Bayonetta devs Platinum Games, this action RPG follows the handsome Drew across the world of Draconis while riding his trusty fire breather Thuban. And yes, he does have wireless headphones that he pops on to help focus on killing enormous reptiles.
There were plenty of reasons to be excited about Scalebound. It was the first action RPG from Platinum Games, with a focus on beautiful visuals as well as the exceptional combat that the studio's known for. And there's the small fact that there's a customisable dragon.
Yes, while you couldn't customise Drew, you could upgrade Thuban to be the kind of fighter you wanted him to be. Plus, your bond with the fiery creature was so strong that if he dies in Draconis, Drew does too. Oh. Throw in multiplayer options in a sprawling bright world and things were looking bright for Scalebound.
Nope, this isn't getting any easier. After an impressive showing at its E3 2016 conference, Microsoft announced in January 2017 that the game was being cancelled.
Game director Hideki Kamiya apologised to fans on Twitter, but promised to keep delivering fun games in future. I'd keep talking about it, but I don't want to drag on. When you think about a modern Rainbow Six game, your mind probably goes to remote-controlled drones and crisply executed breach manoeuvres, rather than a meaningful single-player campaign. But Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Patriots promised an ambitious, introspective, slightly controversial twist on Ubi's venerable shooter series.
If released, Patriots would have seen players take on a right-wing terrorist group called the True Patriots. The game would have been told from the perspective of a number of different characters, including the terrorists, making this a nuanced and narratively ambitious tale of good guys versus bad guys.
The story would have focused on Wall Street corruption told through impressive interactive cinematics. It also featured fully destructive environments, elements of which we'd later see in its spiritual offspring, Rainbow Six Siege. But we'll talk about that in a moment.
So let's talk about how it died. It was all a question of timing. The current generation of consoles had just been announced, leading to a shift in talent away from last-gen systems.
With key members of the development team missing, enthusiasm began to wane for this challenging, edgy version of Rainbow Six, and so Patriots was cancelled. But there is a happy-ish ending to this story. As a replacement for Patriots, we got the excellent Rainbow Six Siege instead, a game that now, years after release, continues to grab new players thanks to an active multiplayer community and its growth as an esport. And if you're desperate for cerebral examinations of the horrors of war, there's always Spec Ops: The Line. It's time to turn the clock back all the way to the early 2000s. No, this isn't what I think the early noughties looked like. It's Peter Molyneux's legendary Stone Age adventure, BC. Developed exclusively for the original Xbox for release in 2004, this was no mere proof of concept. BC, complete with dinosaurs to hunt in a thriving Stone Age world, was in development for years.
In typical Molyneux style, BC had some fascinating mechanics. There was a full living ecosystem to deal with for one thing. You could upgrade your tribe of Stone Age dwellers, switch between them at random, and generally live the life of people who only had rocks and reptiles for company.
This wasn't just a case of simply hunting and killing though. Aforementioned tribespeople had specific skills that you'd need to perform certain tasks. Scouts, hunters, mystics and builders were all available to help you explore the dangerous Jurassic world. But then, like an asteroid hitting Earth, BC was suddenly extinct. In a brief announcement, Peter Molyneux suspended development at Lionhead Studios, and despite hoping to revive the project, the development studio is now sadly also no more. Oh, and yes, they had a T-Rex. Sure, Rocksteady has already made 3 games that count as the ultimate in Batman wish fulfillment, but think for a moment about an even richer, more atmospheric Dark Knight experience. A dessert, so to speak, to follow the brooding, delicious delights of the Arkham games. Yes, it does exist. Or, you know, it did.
Prepare to be very sad indeed. Based on the 1989 comic of the same name from Hellboy writer Mike Mignola, Gotham by Gaslight would see Bruce Wayne donning the cowl and hunting down Jack the Ripper.
Yep, this one hurts just as much as Silent Hills. But hey, at least we have this concept footage to torture our souls. Look at it. Just look at it. Cape swooshing. Now, the reason you don't now have vivid memories of exploring Gotham as a steampunked Cape Crusader is because it didn't get very far beyond the concept stage you've just seen. Day One Studios' dark vision of Gotham just ironically never saw the light of day as the pitch to THQ failed. Painfully, there's even concept art floating around from artist Julie Farrell that makes this hurt even more. Yep, take in all those cogs and a whole new brooding Batman.
So yes, Rocksteady, if you're listening, I don't care if you don't want to make any more Batman games, just please, make the hurt stop.
Okay, so technically we did get a follow-up to Prey. Look, it's on screen right in front of you, but it's a reimagining rather than a true sequel. And we'll happily admit that the 2017 game is an incredible piece of work, but the disappearance of the real Prey 2 makes it feel like something special has escaped our grasp.
The story of the Prey series is one of cancellations, buyouts and developmental twists. Spanning over 22 years, there's been 3 different developers and only 2 released games.
Developers Human Head Studios began work on a Prey sequel after the original was released in 2006, but publishers Take-Two just weren't keen on funding a follow-up, and Bethesda picked up the rights in 2009. Then, after 8 years in development, Prey 2 was cancelled in 2014. The original Prey featured portals, wall walking and a Native American backstory, but the sequel was different, the tale of a human bounty hunter on the far side of space. It promised the free running of Mirror's Edge and the tone of Blade Runner. The screenshots, with their weird, Trekkie aliens and steamy otherworld environments, were enough to get any sci-fi fan salivating.
Chris Reinhardt, project lead on Prey 1 and Prey 2 at Human Head Studios, said that if Prey 1 was Luke's story, then Prey 2 was Boba Fett's. Which, if you think about it, and include Star Wars 1313, means we've actually missed 2 games about the Mandalorian bounty hunter. Thanks.
On the bright side, it's amazing that we got another Prey game, not least one developed by Arcane, which lets you turn into an actual cup, but we still can't help but wonder what might have been.
So there's 7 cancelled games that could have been amazing. And yes, we've left out Half-Life 3 and Agent because we still have hope.